Leadership requires that we show up at our best every day, but our best constantly shifts based on what's happening in our lives. Welcome to Tradies Who Lead, the podcast about everyday leadership for everyday legends. I'm Ashley Baltecki, a diesel mechanic by trade and your host. Today, our guest Aaron W.D. Huey is a construction mental health advocate, life coach and founder of Hustletalk Coaching. With over 20 years in construction and a personal journey through anxiety, stress, and single fatherhood, Aaron helps men break the stigma around mental health through coaching, workshops, and site toolbox talks. He empowers men, especially fathers and leaders, to manage stress, improve relationships, and become the best version of themselves. Coach Huey's no-nonsense, relatable approach provides practical tools for navigating challenges with greater self-awareness, ownership, and resilience so that tradies can learn how to shift from merely surviving to thriving with real, actionable steps towards better mental health. Thanks for joining me on the podcast, Huey.
No problem. Thank you very much for having me on.
It's a pleasure. We had a couple of tech issues getting started, but we persevered. So what is leadership to you?
Leadership is taking the good and the bad of what you've learned along the way and passing it down to try and streamline it. I guess you have to learn some lessons the hard way, but I think leadership is minimizing that for those below you, who are under you, who you're supervising, so that they don't make as many mistakes as what you had, so that, you know, the job, the site, life can run easier. I guess it's taking what you've learned, good and bad, and kind of passing that on.
Where did your leadership journey begin? Like, when did you start seeing yourself as a leader or calling yourself a leader?
In the role that I'm in now as a coach for tradesmen, that kind of came around about 5 years ago. As a tradie, I've always kind of fell into the roles of looking after guys from a young age. You know, back home in Scotland, I helped run a team, and then here fell into site managing, site foreman, I guess, quicker than site managing, and then site managing. So it's kind of something that I've always done. But in the role that I'm in now, it came when I was actually looking to try and get out of the industry. I wanted to change, and I went through a few things personally and from a mental health perspective, and losing a few friends, and it made me look at life differently. So I went down the life coaching path, and I wanted to become, a life coach. I wanted to help other people move on with their life, get better at their life. But what I was finding was that the conversations I was having as a life coach with clients and my own coaches, I'd never heard any of these conversations on site in construction. And I remember saying to one of my coaches one day, I was like, you know what, I'm learning so much here that I could probably utilize on site. And it was her who said to me, she was like, you think other guys could benefit from this? I was like, yeah, 100%. She said, well, there you go. That's who you need to help. She's like, you are the kind of living embodiment of who you're trying to help. It's like people, when they think of mental health in construction, you should be the person, because you've been through it. You're now on the journey of fixing your wrongs, learning some stuff. That's what you need to do. So that was back in 2020, end of 2020. And yeah, ever since then, I've been on this path of coach for the tradies, to have those conversations that I never heard of years ago back home here, whether it be on site, whether it be in the office, whether it be with apprentices or tradesmen, just to kind of, I guess, have the conversations that a lot of our guys in construction aren't willing to have, but two, also they've never really heard anyone else talk in their language about these things, mental health, suicide awareness, stress management, all of these things, that whole she'll be right mentality that we have here in Australia for tradies. Yeah. I'm like, okay, boys, enough is enough. We all know that isn't serving us anymore. How about we try something different? And that's the kind of approach that I go at, with some fruitful language along the way.
I mean, what's a blue collar industry without all the swear words? I guess that's really powerful to know that leadership journey of you trying to lift the people who have less experience than yourself while you were supervising and managing on the tools has actually flowed into the role you have now of you've been on your own journey and you're trying to pass those lessons on to other tradies so they can benefit from those lessons as well. Obviously, you're a very big advocate and passionate advocate for mental health in the trade sector, and that's a core part of what you're coaching men on job sites around. What do you think is the challenge with the current or the traditional HR approach to mental health in the construction sector?
What I see, unfortunately, is there's a lot of white collar solutions to blue collar problems. And what I mean by that is there's lots of, posters on the wall. There's the Are You Okay days where we all get together and have cupcakes, which is great for the guys and girls in the office who can, spend an hour celebrating that. Or if they need to have an hour to themselves, they can go off and have an hour in an office, nice air conditioned office. That doesn't resonate with the guys and girls on the ground who work solidly 8 hours a day, who, if they go missing for an hour, will get chastised. So I feel even down to the conversations that are being had, they're coming from people who are in HR roles and who mean well. They are like, this isn't a knock on them. I just think we need to mix up the approaches. You'll get someone who comes from, say, a mental health charity or a suicide awareness charity, and they'll come out and they'll try and preach the message. They'll teach the skills, but they've never spent a day on site. So they don't know what it's like to get up at 4 o'clock in the morning to get ready to be on site for 6 or 7, do like 8 hours in the sun, and then go home and battle whatever you've got going at home, whether it's financial, whether it's mental health, whether it's family issues, And it's what I see is there's a lot of, I have it on my t-shirt, HR fluffy bullshit out there that just, it ticks the box for a lot of companies, and they look like they're doing great on their website, on their, Are You Okay day. It looks great for social media. Look what we're doing. But realistically, when you talk to the blue collar side of their company, no one ever comes out to them. Like the amount of sites I have went to and said, offer my services to do my toolbox talk or to talk to their guys at keynote speak. Oh, it's all right. We have like EAPs that look after us. Okay. We have numbers to call. Okay. That's awesome. When was the last time somebody came out to site? Oh, never. So then what is the fucking point? Like, you can't point to a picture or a number on the wall and say, if you're struggling, here, call this. It just doesn't work for the guys and girls on the ground. And I think we need to change the approach. Like, we need to be taking the difficult conversations to site and taking it to the guys and girls who are there and saying, like, look, I know what you're going through. Here's what here's where I was. Or just even telling them that, like, a lot of people don't even know, because they're just so focused on day-to-day work, trade. They don't even know the numbers, or they wouldn't even know where to go if they had to call somebody. And again, a poster in the site office or on the lunch shed, it just becomes background noise and no one really ever picks up on it. The amount of people who don't even know some of the services that are out there is one of the factors that we need to change. A lot of HR people probably don't like me saying that, but it's the truth. Like, we've got a lot of white collar solutions to blue collar problems, and they just don't work.
It is very much around that culture piece of, we're paid by the hour. Our time isn't the same as someone who is in a salary environment, and we're under a lot of pressure. And there is that cultural barrier as well of, it's not something that we talk about. And so there's no real role models of someone seeking help that we know of within our space usually. And so it's just, sometimes we don't even realize that we need to be seeking help, or that we should be asking for help, because we're not given any examples of that's a healthy thing to do. So how important do you think role models are in this space to kind of normalize seeking help?
Massive. It's one of the biggest things. Like, we need people to be standing up and putting their hand up and saying, I need help, or I have needed help, and this is what I've done. This is where I've been. This is the struggles I went through, and just vocalizing it, because it still amazes me when I speak to guys, the amount of guys who think they're the only ones going through financial struggles, drink, drug struggles, relationship struggles, work struggles, whatever. It's like, no. I hate to tell you, but you're not special. We've all gone through it. We're all going through it. However, you don't have to go through it alone. And it comes from role models, guys on site, both old and young. Younger guys are probably more likely to talk about it now because of our generational shift. And it's probably a lot more of the older guys who still turn their nose up at it, and because that's how they've been brought up. And there's a lot of, older guys in the industry who have never had to have these conversations. They've got through life. Well, they think they've got through life well. But when you look at them, a conversation piece that I say, we all know a tradie who goes, we all know a grumpy tradie who goes home to a dog and a six-pack at the end of the night because they've ruined all their relationships, or their kids don't want anything to do with them, or they're just grumpy. Or someone will spring to mind when I say that. It's like, do you really want to be them in 30, 40 years? Like, you come to work because you've got nothing else out with work. And we all know those men. And it's like, okay, let's not be them. Like, if they're never going to change, if we can't help move them along and that's how they're stuck in their ways, then okay. But the younger generation and probably the middle-aged men like this, it's not too late that we can change our outlook on things and we can start having these conversations. And it just solely comes from guys actually saying, yeah, I've been there. This is what I've done.
I see being a role model as its own type of leadership. What kind of tools or strategies do you use to lead, whether that was when you were a supervisor or manager on the tools versus what you're doing now?
As a site manager, I wouldn't ask guys to do anything that I wouldn't be prepared to do myself. And I've always had that kind of ethos. And I do a lot of that through my own coaching. Like, a lot of the stuff I teach and preach is things that I have either tried or still utilize to this day. the breath work that I do, the box breathing to help me get through the day. I still utilize that as just a singular site trader, but I even use it as a dad. And I explain that to guys, like you can use these things at home as well to help you de-stress, help you think clearly and properly. I wouldn't teach or preach something that I haven't done myself. And as a site manager, I would be the exact same. Like we all know guys who they push and push and push, but they're not willing to, when it comes to the crunch, get down and help the lads out. They'll hide in the office, and that's not leadership. We all know people like that, and they aren't the ones. Like I remember one of the site managers when I was a site foreman saying to me, "You need to use the honey and the stick. Some days you need to beat them into it, and other days you need to ease them into it. It's like we have to be there at all ends. Like some days you're going to have to help them out, and other days you just can't. But you have to be firm, and they'll understand that. On the days that you've helped them out, they'll be more willing to go above and beyond on the days that you're cracking the whip, and we're running out of time. Like we need to get this job done, or it's raining and we need to get through it, whatever it may be. So you have to be prepared to give and take. And I see a lot of companies actually just see theirs, especially when it comes to subbies, is just a number on the board. I've been spoken to like that, and I've heard guys speak to guys like that. And I'm like, that's just not how you're going to get, whether you're a tier 1, tier 2, tier 3, whatever you are, that's just bad leadership and that's bad management. And you're not going to get the desired effect that you want, or you're just going to keep pushing your subbies out and they're not going to want to work with you. Or if they find out they're on one of your sites, they're just not going to help. And it's just a bad culture that we need to get rid of in the industry.
Construction is highly competitive, especially when you're looking at some of those top tier construction projects, and poor culture can also be an additional stress. Even if people don't necessarily recognize it as a source of stress, if they're not feeling comfortable at work or valued at work, it does become a factor on their psychological safety. How do you approach stress management on a construction site?
The risk analysis of things that when you come to and you look on site and it's like, PPE, legislation, barriers, mental health should be at the top of that, because if your head isn't in the game, all of them go out. Like if you're thinking about something that happened the night before, this is when accidents happen, and you're not thinking, you're having arguments with people. The hierarchy needs to be mental health, stress management first. I still do it to this day, and I teach it to the guys, is having a panic attack. People don't know what it's like to have a panic attack. And the amount of guys I've spoken, like being in front of and said, who here has had a panic attack? No one will put their hand up. And I'll call bullshit now, because you all have had one. You can't be in this industry and not have had one just due to the high stress factor. But then when I explain it to them, what it feels like, heat rising up through the body, thoughts getting all jumbled, you're not really sure what to do, you get a pain in either your chest or your back, then most guys are like, oh fuck, I have one of them most days. I'm like, well, that's what's called a panic attack. Here's how you can combat it. And it's simple breathwork strategy, box breathing it's called. And you can do it. I've done it in the truck myself. I've done it in the site office. You can go and do it in the dunny if you want. And wherever you may be, it literally takes 3 or 4 minutes. And you just sit, breathe in for 4 seconds, hold it, breathe out for 4 seconds, hold it, and you repeat that. And what it does is it slows everything down. Because you're focusing on the counting, you can't think about anything else. So it drops your heart rate, it clears up the brain so that you can think clearer. And it's something I utilized when I was a site manager. I learned along the way. I still use it yet. And it's a simple thing for guys to use. Guys and girls could use this on site, and it's just one thing that just brings everything back. When there's a million and one things going on, and you need to be thinking clearly, you need to be thinking precise, and you need to be able to make proper judgment quickly. That's a simple tool that I teach most people because it's effective. A lot of people say, I can't afford to do this. It costs you nothing. 10 minutes of your day. And if you don't have 10 minutes of your day to go and sit somewhere and do that so that you can come back and be present, you could be thinking clearer for your own safety, for the safety of others. Even when it comes to, like, you can utilize this at home as well. Like when it comes to dealing with the kids, or if you had an argument with your partner, or even like, it's just, it can be used in so many ways. On site, it's a simple tool, but it's effective.
I like that you bring up that the tool can overlap with both work and personal life, because those lines no longer are as separated as they used to be. There's a lot more understanding that our personal and work life blur a lot because they influence each other. And the construction industry isn't known for having great work-life balance. So what advice do you have for tradies around how they can improve their work-life balance?
A simple one for that, that's tried and tested because I have learned it the hard way and I utilize it. It's something called leave your boots and shit at the door. It's when you get home, before you get out of your truck, before you get out of the garage, before you walk through the door, take 10 minutes, leave everything, the stress, the struggles, the fights, the whatever it may be, let it all go. It'll be there tomorrow. You can deal with it maybe later that night, but just for that next few hours when you walk through the door, clear it all and be present for whoever's behind the door, whether your kids, your partner, your mum, your dad, whatever it may be, because they don't need to take the raft of what happened throughout the day. Yes, we have struggles at work. Yes, we have fights, we have arguments, but they didn't cause any of it. They weren't part of it. So for that small amount of time that you're with them at home at night, because we do spend most of our time with our workmates and at work, and it's a short period, go in and be present with them. And then when the kids go to bed, or your partner goes off, whatever, then you can pick up the phone, then you can pick up the email, whatever it may be. Now, this obviously is going to work easier in certain circumstances, depending on what your trade is, what your role is. But you have to have that physical barrier of just being like, letting it go, like whatever it may be. And again, I still use this yet when I go to pick up my kids. I pick up my kids from daycare. I just let everything go from what happened the day before. And then it works vice versa too. So in the morning, before you go out to work, once you've either dropped the kids off or you're about to leave for work, put the boots back on, whatever's happened the night before, the fights, the arguments, the stresses, the struggles, whatever it may be going on in your household or your family, leave that there. Don't take that to work, because the first person you come across is going to fuel your wrath. You're going to be arguing. You're going to be on the kind of the off foot to start throughout the day. And these are all things that you have, the barriers and the boundaries that you have to put up for yourself and say, no, like I'm not going to let both of them run into each other. It's very easily to do, but you have to be physically aware, mentally aware enough to go, right, okay, pick a point, be the garage, be the porch, be the door, whatever it may be. And there's a break point, and it's highly effective. I've had so many guys like reach back out to me and they're like, I use that leave your boots and shit at home method. And it feels like I'm taking like the weight off my shoulders for the day, and I'm going in, and vice versa. Like I can go to work and not worry about whatever's going on at home. And again, it costs nothing. It's 10 minutes of your time, and it's simple but effective.
It's really about creating intention of recognizing that as much as they're both really big parts of our lives, we can spend all day thinking about something, but we can't do anything about it because we're in the opposite environment, whether it's we're at work when we're having issues at home or vice versa. And it's that acknowledgement of there's no amount of thinking right now that's going to fix this. So I do have to put it down. And that can be a really challenging thing to do, because it is around our self-management skills to say, I'm having a tough time. I'm aware I'm having a tough time, but I'm still going to put it down. And I don't think that that means that we can't share with someone at work, like, no, I'm having a tough time at home, because I think that's part of that self-management of, okay, maybe our boots and shit are at home, but who we are as a whole person, by telling other people where it's appropriate that there's stuff going on, actually gives us the grace that, well, now they know that I might be a little bit quieter today, but it's because I'm managing my frustration and it's because I'm managing my stress. And it is really about being able to regulate ourselves. And that can be a really hard skill to learn when we're not taught that throughout our lives. We really have to educate ourselves.
Yeah, absolutely. Like these are all things that no one teaches us when we're apprentices, or like when you come through your time, no one tells you any of this stuff. Even as men and women, not a lot of people tell, they don't teach us this stuff in school. Like a lot of us have to go searching for this stuff, like this education. Once you know it and you can utilize it, yeah, you have to keep practicing it. Because a lot of guys get to like their late 30s and maybe early 40s and they start realizing this stuff. And then they wonder why they keep falling back into their old habits, so they're still grumpy. It's like, dude, you just spent 40 years of your life doing this one thing. It's not going to change overnight. Like, you have to give yourself some grace. Like, you're going to have good days, you're going to have bad days, but it's knowing that you're able to be aware enough of both of them. Like, okay, I'm trying, I am implementing some things that are going to help me here, but I'm going to fall back. But it's getting up and keep going. It's not just giving up and just being like, okay, I'll go back to the bottle, or I'll go back to the drugs, or whatever it may be. It's like, no, keep going. Like, keep implement these things. And you touched on something there about talking to the guys at work. The amount of guys who know everything about each other but know nothing about each other is ridiculous. Like, the amount of guys who, you work with teams of guys 6, 7, 8, 9 hours a day, 4, 5, 6 days a week, depending on what your crew is. And, you'll know their favorite team, their favorite movie, what they eat, what beer they like, what TV they watch. But no one ever talks about what they're going through. And if more guys were to be a little bit more close knit with their team when it comes to that and work through it together, it's that old phraseology that problem shared is a problem halved. And you'll probably find people, and I've had this, like, I've been in rooms where I've been speaking to guys who are friends, and I'll say something and it'll trigger something in one of the guys, and he'll bring up a situation of like, this is what's going on for me. I haven't shared it with the guys, but what do you think I should do? And 2 or 3 other guys will be like, oh, I've been through that. This is what I did. Or, yeah, you know what, I'm going through that right now. That's funny you should say that. I'm like, you're all here. Like, just talk a little bit more below the surface level of actually, and it doesn't have to be all woo-woo and, getting up, talking about all of your feelings. But if you're struggling, if you are having a hard time, just let your workmate know. Because it's one of the biggest things when people say to me, for instance, if one of their workmates takes their own life through suicide, like, oh, we didn't see it coming. It's like, well, there's always signs. And sometimes there's not. Sometimes it's just out of the blue. People don't know. But for the majority of them, there's slight changes in their behavior or their mood, or, they're not coming to work on time, or they're isolating themselves, or they're drinking a little bit more, whatever it means, there's changes. But what we need to do is workmates is actually pull them up on it. Like, say, are you good? Like, I've noticed such and such. And it doesn't have to come from a blame. If it comes from a place of love and concern, like as for a workmate, for a teammate, it's like, I've just noticed that you've been a bit off. Is everything all good? I would rather have that conversation with somebody or make them feel uncomfortable because I've noticed, than never asking them. And then the next day they don't come to work and I get a phone call to say, oh, did you hear about such and such? It took his own life last night. And trying to get that across to guys, and trying to get that across to, guys and girls in the construction side, like, we need to be looking out for each other a little bit more than what we do. We're with each other more than our families. And at the end of the day, none of us do this for love. We do this for money. We do this so that we can go home to our families. We do this so that we can buy the shiny things. We can go on holiday. We can, treat ourselves, treat our partners. But at the end of the day, something happens to you at work because, you have an accident, you haven't been thinking properly, or you're stressed out and you're rushing and something happens, you'll be replaced. Like, someone will replace you. However, no one's going to walk through the door for you that night. And I hear this so many times, and it's a powerful message to get across to people. And their employees probably don't like me saying it, but I'm like, you're just a number. You really are just a number. I don't care how long you've worked for someone. If shit hits the fan, you can easily be replaced by somebody else. However, no one's going to replace you at home. As tradies, we identify with our trade. And it's like, no. And one of the questions I ask when I'm coaching guys is like, if you were to have an accident at work, and God forbid you lost an arm or a leg and you weren't able to do your trade, who would you be? And a lot of guys, it's like the rabbit in the headlights, like, oh, I've never thought about that. I've never wanted to do anything else, or I don't know any different. I've been doing this since I was 16. It's like, okay, maybe it's time you thought about, something else. Maybe it's something at the weekend, or, a side hustle or something, just because at the end of the day, this is just a job. And for whatever reason, us as trades, we identify as a trade, and that's us, that's our identity, but it's really not. It's just what we do to get money.
Especially when you talk about we've got to look out for each other more. I think the biggest misconception I've had myself is that I've always worried, like, well, what if I say the wrong thing? And the reality is, if someone is struggling that much, even if you say the wrong thing, it will still be better than saying nothing. And that can be scary. But as a blue collar sector, and I've found this across all trades, our sense of camaraderie is one of the greatest gems of being a tradie. But we just have to take it that one step further and go, well, we can have this great banter, we can have a great joke, we can have a lot of love and respect for each other, but we need to make sure that that love and respect goes down to that next level and just sheds off that one layer of, okay, we can ask and say, hey, I've noticed something's up, what's going on for you? And that's how we can support one another better, because no matter what we do, something's going to happen in life. Like, shit always hits the fan at one point or another. So the better we get at having these conversations, the better we can all be for it in our industry and in our lives.
Unfortunately, none of us are getting out of this alive, as they say, but there's a lot of people who take their own way out just because they haven't been able to either voice it themselves, or someone hasn't picked it up, or they haven't felt comfortable having that conversation. And we need to really get, for the benefit of those who are no longer here, we really need to change that so that we can get the numbers down.
In a nutshell, what would be your advice for tradies about how they can show up as everyday leaders on the job site?
There's a lot of back and forth right now about women coming into the industry, and women are going to change the industry. And there's a lot of pushback from the guys. And I think as leaders, both male and female, we need to look at the masculine and the feminine energy of what it means to be a leader. So on the masculine side of it, it's the protection, it's the providing, it's looking after your team. But then you need to add into that the empathy of the feminine energy. It's being empathetic for your team. It's looking at them from a different level. I think as leaders, we need to be able to balance both of that. That kind of goes back to the stick and the honey. So you need to be able to provide and protect your team and push them to get the job done, but you also need to nurture them. And this doesn't mean cuddling them and hugging them. This is just like point them in the right direction. But on the days where they are struggling with something, it's just being able to like take foot off the pedal a little bit and stop pushing and go, all right, okay, what do I need? What can I do as a leader to help this go smoother for you? Or what do we need to implement for you? it needs to be that balance of the masculine and the feminine, and educating people on that it's not a male and female thing. It's actually traits of being a good leader. Like, you look at the leaders throughout time, they have had both of them, because, you know, people want to be led into battle, but they also want to be rewarded for it afterwards. And we need that on site. Like, people need to be able to see that you're willing to do what you're asking them to do yourself, but also reward them for it once the job's done, you know, thanking them for it, like being there for it. A simple, you know, you did a great job today. Thanks very much for your help. I really appreciate you staying back this few hours. Those little things there, they can go such a long way, but some people are just so focused on getting the job done, you know, getting it done on time, getting it done under price, go, 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 go. That's the solid masculinity. It's like, no, we need to be able to have both. And I think if we can utilize that a bit more in the construction industry, probably not going to change it overnight, but it'll certainly go a long way to helping it.
That's really powerful advice. And I think it really encaptures everything you've discussed in terms of being able to pause and breathe with box breathing if you are feeling a bit overwhelmed or panicked in the moment, to even just being able to sometimes leave your boots and shit at the door. So thank you so much for sharing your insights with the podcast today, Huey. There's definitely been a lot of really valuable tips that are actionable at the job site for tradies listening to this podcast about how they can actually improve their lives. And they're able to connect with you via the links in the bio if they are interested in having more coaching or having you come and attend their workplace, to create awareness around mental health and how we can actually make the industry better for everyone.
Absolutely. Thank you for having me on.
If you enjoyed this episode, you can follow the podcast on socials at Tradies Who Lead, or subscribe to Tradies Who Lead wherever you're listening. Remember to like, share, or leave a review. It helps more tradies connect with the show. Thanks for tuning in. A new episode is released every fortnight, and I look forward to connecting with you again soon.